Hello and welcome to the Warcraft Academy guide to playing a balanced druid in patch 5.4. This guide is going to cover the basics of the rotation as well as some more advanced tips, and later talk about stats and character customization. Use the menu at the top of the screen to skip between sections. First of all, let's quickly run over how the rotation works and what each of your spells do. The base aim of the Moonkin rotation is to quickly work back and forth between the two eclipse states, lunar and solar. You can think of the cycle as having two main states, an eclipse state where your mastery is active, lunar and solar, and an uneclipsed state where mastery is inactive and you're working towards the next eclipse. The eclipse bar begins in the center of the bar at 0 and can build up to 100 energy on either the lunar or the solar side. When you reach an eclipse state by reaching one side of the bar, a specific school of damage is increased, and you gain 50% of your mana back, and you gain a 15% haste increase called Nature's Grace. Maintaining a high uptime of this haste effect is absolutely integral to your DPS. You can't go backwards through the bar, only progressing forwards, which means if the bar starts moving in one direction, it has to go all the way to the end before it can go the other way. Moonkin has two main nukes, Starfire and Wrath. Starfire does arcane damage and grants 20 solar energy, causing the eclipse bar to move right. Wrath does nature damage and grants 15 lunar energy, causing the eclipse bar to move to the left. If you're not under the effect of an eclipse, these spells grant double their respective energy. Now, other than your two main nukes, you have an additional one, which is Star Surge. This is on a 15-second cooldown, and its damage is increased by both eclipses, and it also grants energy in whichever direction the bar is already moving. You have two dots available to you at all times, Moonfire and Sunfire. Moonfire does extra damage when you cast it during lunar eclipse, and Sunfire does extra when cast during solar eclipse. When you crit with Starfire, you gain an extra 2 seconds on your Moonfire. When you crit with Wrath, you gain an extra 2 seconds on your Sunfire. When you crit with Star Surge, you gain 2 seconds on both. In addition, whenever Moonfire or Sunfire crits, you have a 30% chance to gain the Shooting Stars proc. This proc resets the cooldown of your Star Surge and makes it instant cast. Reacting to this proc quickly is extremely important. Solar Eclipse is activated when you reach the right side of the bar. It buffs your nature damage, so increases the damage of Wrath, Star Surge, Sunfire, Hurricane and Wild Mushrooms. This eclipse is best for dedicated AoE. Lunar Eclipse is activated when you reach the left side of the bar. It buffs your arcane damage, so increases the damage of Starfire, Star Surge, Moonfire and Starfall. This eclipse is best for single target damage. Each eclipse lasts until your energy reaches the center of the bar again, but the haste buff it provides lasts for a flat 15 seconds. Moving on to your AoE spells, Starfall is a fire and forget spell that essentially acts as an AoE dot. It damages all targets over 10 seconds and is buffed by Lunar Eclipse. Hurricane is your main AoE spell and needs to be channeled onto enemies. It does extra damage in Solar Eclipse, and during Lunar Eclipse it transforms into Astral Storm. This allows it to benefit from your Lunar Eclipse damage increase, but it's still weaker than it is during Solar. Wild Mushrooms allows you to place 3 mushrooms, and the Detonate spell will blow these up for nature damage. Finally, your cooldowns. Celestial Alignment is a 3-minute cooldown which grants you the effect of both eclipses at once for 15 seconds. When activated, it resets the eclipse bar to 0, prevents it from moving for the entire duration. The spell grants you both eclipses at once, including any benefits of doing so. Applying either one of your dots during Celestial Alignment will also apply the other dot at the same time. It's worth noting that Hurricane and Astral Storm will remain in whatever state it was in before activating Celestial Alignment. As such, if you use Celestial Alignment following a solar eclipse, you'll have Hurricane, but if you use it immediately after a lunar eclipse, you'll still have Astral Storm. Incarnation is a talent that gives you 25% increased arcane and nature damage whilst you're in an eclipse. It has a 3-minute cooldown. Astral Communion is a channeled spell which lets you move your eclipse bar quickly, entering you into an eclipse from 0 energy in 4 seconds. It doesn't have much use in combat, but it should be used to move your energy appropriately before pulls, which we'll talk about during the opener section. If you find yourself without anything to DPS during an encounter, you should cast this to position yourself better on your eclipse bar for what's coming next. With that information in mind, here's how to begin your rotation. At higher gear levels, particularly with RPPM trinkets and the legendary metagem, you'll want to use the Solar Opener. First, use Astral Communion to enter Solar Eclipse before combat, and make sure to put your Wild Mushrooms down. Use Starfall and then pre-pot. Start casting a Wrath, timed to land as soon as the boss is pulled. Immediately activate Incarnation and Celestial Alignment. Apply Moonfire, which will also apply Sunfire thanks to Celestial Alignment, and begin casting Star Surge and Starfire. Before Celestial Alignment expires, make sure to detonate your Wild Mushrooms and reapply Moonfire, although you can skip this if the dots remain significantly buffed from when you first applied them and still has a long duration. Make sure to use your second Starfall as soon as the first one fades. From here, you'll now be progressing towards Lunar Eclipse, so start casting Wrath and Star Surge as needed, and continue your standard rotation. In an ideal situation, during the last 1 to 2 seconds of Celestial Alignment, you'll save any Star Surge procs you get. This is so you can use it as soon as Celestial Alignment ends, and therefore will require 1 fewer Uneclipsed Wrath to hit Lunar. Generally, you should maintain both dots and work at casting the appropriate nuke to progress the Eclipse bar, whilst using Star Surge on cooldown. It's very important to ensure that you use Star Surge every time you get a shooting star proc, otherwise you could be wasting potential procs. It's worth interrupting your current cast in order to cast Star Surge, although obviously don't do this if you're almost finished casting a Starfire. During Lunar Eclipse, cast Star Surge on cooldown and use Starfire as your filler spell. Cast Starfall at the start of every Lunar Eclipse since the cooldown will be reset, and make sure to reapply Moonfire at some point during the eclipse, ideally when you get trinket procs. When you're progressing towards Solar Eclipse, continue using Star Surge on cooldown and using Starfire to progress towards Solar. In Solar Eclipse, start using Wrath as your filler nuke and using Star Surge on cooldown. Make sure to reapply Sunfire during the eclipse. Cycling between eclipses is absolutely key to your DPS. This is because you want to maximize the uptime of Nature's Grace from hitting Eclipse. This is integral to both your casting speed and your dot potency. This is one of the main reasons why movement really hurts balanced DPS. When Celestial Alignment is coming off cooldown, there are 2 ways you can use it. First of all, try to save your previous Starfall cooldown. If it comes off cooldown when you're moving towards a Solar Eclipse, wait until you're in Solar Eclipse, then activate both Celestial Alignment and Incarnation at once, just like in the Solar Opener. Start casting Starfires and Star Surges. In effect, what you're doing here is skipping over the Solar Eclipse. If it comes off cooldown and you're moving towards Lunar Eclipse, wait until you're 1 cast away from entering Lunar, use Starfall, which you should have saved from the previous Lunar, use Wrath to push yourself into Lunar, pop Incarnation, use Star Surge and Starfire, and refresh Starfall when you can. When you reach 0 energy, use Celestial Alignment and continue the process. And finally, here are a few extra advanced tips that you might find useful. If a dot falls off and you're close to the appropriate eclipse, it's fine to wait a few seconds to reapply that dot. You don't need to reapply it instantly. If the dot which will be uneclipsed is falling off, you should generally do the same and wait for the new eclipse so that it will at least benefit from the Nature's Grace haste buff. In general, you should rarely, if ever, apply your dots without Nature's Grace. If you need to apply both dots together, for example at the start of an eclipse, you should apply the uneclipsed dot first. This is because we have a passive, Lunar Shower, which increases the direct damage of our initial dot hit by 45%, stacking up to 3 times, which means your eclipse dot will have a slightly higher initial hit. This is really minor, so don't worry about it too much. Lunar Shower should not be relied on for movement DPS. If you have strong dots up with Trinket and Meta procs, do not override these with weak dots just for the sake of casting something during movement. Instead, try to use any Shooting Stars procs to maximum effect. Otherwise, consider placing Wild Mushrooms to detonate later in Solar, or spamming your uneclipsed dot with Lunar Shower if it's similar in strength to the original. For multi-target, you should first be aware that Hurricane and Astral Storm are very inefficient and really interrupt your eclipse progression. They'll eat into your Nature's Grace uptime and really slow down your single target damage. Therefore, you need to weigh up whether it's worth interrupting your single target rotation to AoE at all, or leave it to others. Hurricane is roughly 30% stronger than Astral Storm, so you should ideally aim to be in Solar Eclipse for AoE. If you're simply multi-dotting, both eclipses are equal. In multi-dot scenarios, apply both dots to the main target, and then apply your eclipse dot to all targets, assuming that target will live for more than a few seconds. Follow that up by applying the uneclipsed dot, then use your standard rotation to push to the next eclipse where you'll apply the new eclipsed dot again. Cast Star Surge and refresh dots as necessary. It goes without saying that Incarnation and Celestial Alignment are extremely strong during multi-dot scenarios. Try to sync these up with multi-dot periods as much as possible. For dedicated AoE such as Galacrus, decide how long the mobs will live for. If you can dot as they run in, you can use Nature's Grace uptime on haste and hurricanes and hope for shooting stars procs to push you to the next eclipse. At higher gear levels, it's often better to just apply at least the eclipse dot to all the targets and use your star surges to push rather than hurricane. If you are going to use hurricane, make sure you recast hurricane just before Nature's Grace expires. Do the same with legendary metagem procs. For more bursty AoE such as the blobs on the Dark Shaman, try to time it so that you enter Solar Eclipse just as the mobs spawn, allowing you to hurricane the ads with Solar. In terms of pure numbers, an Eclipse dot will always do more damage than Hurricane or Astral Storm, provided it can tick for long enough. In Solar, Hurricane is not worth interrupting for Star Surge procs unless you wish to use these to push your Eclipse progression. In Lunar, it is worth interrupting Astral Storm to cast a Star Surge on any particular target. Again, use your discretion. In general, don't use Wild Mushrooms in your standard AoE rotations because it has a lower damage per execution time than Hurricane. You can pre-place these if necessary and then detonate them before or in between Hurricane casts. So moving on to your stat priorities, your first priority is Intellect. After that you need Hit or Spirit up until the cap, which is 15%. After that go for Haste up until one of the two breakpoints, 5273 and 10296. If you can't reach the second breakpoint, you should prioritize Crit above Haste and Haste above Mastery. Don't sacrifice all your crit to reach the second breakpoint. Try to keep some based on how many shooting stars procs you want. There's no rule about how much crit you should keep, although many suggest around 8,000. With that in mind, these are the best gems and enchants for Balance Druids. Gemming into Expertise is a good strategy at high levels of gear only if it allows you to reforge out of hit and into more crit elsewhere on your gear. In addition, if you're pushing for a particular haste breakpoint, you can substitute these gems for their haste counterparts to aid the process. Moonkin glyphs don't have much impact on your rotational spells. Instead, they focus on your utility. Guided Stars is situationally useful, for example if you want your Starfall to not hit specific targets to avoid aggro. Glyph of Stampede allows you to use Stampeding Roar whilst you're in Moonkin form, which makes it essentially required for proper raiding. Similarly, Glyph of Stampeding Roar increases the range, so it's very useful for raids. Glyph of Rebirth resurrects players at 100% health instead of 60%. Moving on to your talents, in the first tier, Feline Swiftness should be your default choice for the 15% increase in movement speed. The other two talents only have limited use, especially because Displacer Beast will shift you out of Moonkin form, meaning it will require an extra global cooldown to switch back. In the second tier, your default choice should be Ysera's Gift, giving you some extra passive healing. Other than that, Cenarian Ward is not worth using and Renewal is weak but has occasional use. For example, if you need an extra emergency heal in addition to Nature's Swiftness with Healing Touch. In the third tier, use whatever is appropriate to your raid setup and strategy. In tier 4, Incarnation is the strongest talent overall. It's a strong 3-minute cooldown that synergizes well with Celestial Alignment, granting 25% extra Eclipse damage whilst active. This should always be your talent of choice for fights with multiple targets and should also be your choice for single target with higher gear, particularly with the Amplification Trinket from Immersius. Force of Nature provides consistent DPS, but is only for single target. If you have lower levels of gear, this should pull ahead in single target encounters only. If you do take this, they have 3 charges with a 20-second recharge and don't require a global cooldown, therefore you should use them in between casts and with as many procs up as you can manage. In tier 5, again, use whatever is appropriate for your raid team and the fight, although it's worth noting that Ursol's Vortex is a unique mechanic for druids and tends to be more valuable. In the 6th tier, Heart of the Wild should be your default choice. It's a passive 6% intellect at all times, which makes it the best. It also provides 45 seconds of bonus abilities related to the other specs, and usually you'll be using this with Tranquility to make it a stronger raid cooldown. Dream of Cenarius, whilst powerful, is awkward to use and significantly slows your rotation, since it requires a healing touch cast before every eclipse, and adds extra complexity. At very low levels of gear, such as challenge modes, it does have some use, but it isn't really worth using in raids except in extreme circumstances such as being on belt duty for Siegecraft and Blackfuse. Intellect is king when assessing your gear. If you have a higher eye level piece with a significant intellect upgrade, use that regardless of the secondary stats. Any set bonuses you acquire should be upgraded smoothly from tier to tier. It's always worth breaking the previous 4 piece to use the new 2 piece. The best off-tier piece in tier 16 is the Dark Fang Mask from the Dark Shaman encounter, but none of the other pieces are very far behind. For your trinkets, you should aim to get the Amplification trinket from Immersius as quickly as you can, and then the next best one is Cardrish's Toxic Totem. Garrosh's Black Blood trinket is worse than Cardrish's Toxic Totem, but it's still a fine alternative. Thanks very much for watching this guide. If you have any comments or suggestions, post them below or email us, and if you're interested in being coached by a top balanced druid, click on screen for more information.